Bonjour à tous et bienvenue sur le podcast Ouvrir une filiale aux États-Unis. Je suis Nicolas Bernard Masson, dirigeant de la société Masson International, société qui représente l'État de Pennsylvanie en France, Suisse et Belgique. Nous recevons dans cet épisode Jonathan Grode, avocat d'immigration à Philadelphie, qui nous décryptera la situation actuelle des visas américains et nous donnera quelques clés sur comment continuer ces démarches de visa. Si vous appréciez le contenu, n'oubliez pas de vous abonner au podcast et à la chaîne YouTube et de laisser un pouce bleu au passage. Je vous souhaite une très bonne écoute. So thank you, Jonathan, for joining us for this podcast on the current situation on the visas right now in the U.S. Kind of crazy situation. So Jonathan, can you introduce yourself? Talk about your experience, your diplomas, and what you've done in the past, and what you are doing right now.
Sure. So my name's Jonathan Grode. I am the practice director for Green and Spiegel. We're an immigration firm, and we help people migrate to the United States and also to Canada. And we have a particular focus on companies that are setting up new businesses in the United States. We work extensively with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We are as welcoming as the Commonwealth is when it comes to new businesses. And we like to think that we play a small part in making America a better country by helping and facilitating companies to get a foothold here. In addition, I'm the president of the French American Chamber of Commerce for the Philadelphia area. It's been an awesome job. I've really enjoyed getting to learn more about French business and French culture, and I've had the opportunity to go to France for work numerous times since I assumed this role, and obviously through my work as an immigration lawyer. As far as qualifications, I did my undergraduate degree in Cleveland at a university called Case Western Reserve. And then I came back home to Philadelphia and I went to Temple University for law school. Even though I may look young, that was many years ago now. So it's really a pleasure to be here with you. We are facing an unprecedented time in terms of not only a global pandemic, but also the self-made challenges that this particular federal administration has placed on the immigrant community. And that has really been a challenge to navigate, and I'm looking forward to exploring it with you further. But one thing I think we need to say from the outset is that the views of the federal administration when it comes to immigration are not shared by the Commonwealth. It's not shared by the state of Pennsylvania. It's not shared by the city of Philadelphia. And I think one of the reasons why I love living here, where the country was founded and where the concept of immigration making the United States a better place was established, is that those core principles of what it means to be American still really hold true in the way the state behaves in looking at foreign investment and the way the city behaves when we look at companies that are looking to establish operations in the Philadelphia region. So, the undertones of a federal administration change when the administration changes. But immigration being an essential part of the American experiment will never change. And I think that's something we need to remember as we try to get through this challenging time.
Can we just go back in time a couple months ago? What happened with this administration? What Trump has signed that is right now affecting the visas? What has he done that? And how do you see, what do you feel right now regarding this situation?
Yeah, so the Trump administration actually started very early on in its presidency trying to curtail immigration. In fact, there was an executive order in 2017 that greatly made adjudication very challenging. And then particular to France, there's a visa that we love to use called the E2 visa. And I think in our next session, we're going to kind of get into the nuts and bolts of immigration law. But the E2 is like for French-owned businesses so they can transfer French nationals to the US. And that visa is like my all-time favorite. Before the Trump administration, it was valid for 60 months and renewable in 5-year increments as long as the business remained active. Well, somewhere along the way, the Trump administration decided to single out France, and they changed the duration from 60 months to 25 months. So these little sort of pushes against the immigration system have been going on for a long time. When the pandemic hit, it changed things dramatically because it gave a very strong justification for the administration to curtail immigration. And the first wave of restrictions really came through a feeling that they were protecting the United States from the coronavirus. And then the second wave is more dealing with protecting US jobs because the unemployment rate has become so high. And we'll unpack that a little bit. But a couple of months ago, the first wave of restrictions actually came when they placed what we call a 14-day hold on anybody from a Schengen area country entering the United States if they were in the Schengen area within the past 14 days. And this was like, in March when things were really raging in Italy and there was concern, and they said, well, we can't have Europeans come to the United States. But honestly, unlike other countries which have mandated like a quarantine, like you can come in, but you have to go and sit over here for 14 days, the United States put this blanket block on entering the US. But there's so many waivers. To be honest with you, I don't know how much it's actually restricting the flow of the virus. Like US citizens can still come in if they were living in a Schengen area, green card holders, spouses and children of US citizens and green card holders. I mean, there's a million exemptions. So I think, I'm not an epidemiologist, but I think we've all kind of become amateur virus experts. And my feeling is if you really wanted to curtail some of this behavior, the quarantine methodology seems to be a stronger one than blocking people from certain countries. For example, like what has become very popular with Europeans is, okay, you got a 14-day wait, you can't come to the United States. I'm going to go to Cancun for 14 days. And I'm going to hang out in Mexico and have a little beach holiday because they don't have restrictions on people coming in. And there's actually no block on air travel between Mexico and the US. So I'm going to hang out here and then I'm going to go into America. So, what is this actually doing? I don't know. But from the perspective of a restriction that's been placed by the administration, that was the real first one that we saw.
And at this stage, let's call it the stage 1 of the visa restriction regarding the virus, did you notice already did you notice that the businesses in the region, in the Philadelphia region or in the US, the from foreign companies, they have been hit by this first visa restriction?
Yeah. I mean, I think initially when this came out, people were really just like, I don't want to travel anyway. So I don't think there was much of an immediate impact. There was a rash of people like rushing to get into the United States. So Trump announced it went into effect 36 hours later or so. Every single flight to the US was like fully booked with people that were like rushing to get back. Where I think the pain has really been felt is the understanding that while a lot of things can be done remotely, a lot of things can be done through video conferencing like we're doing today, some things require in-person, whether it's setting up a manufacturing operation or, fulfilling a contractual obligation with repairing equipment. These are the things that have become very problematic. And this is where companies are coming to us, and we can get waivers of the 14-day hold. So if there is a situation where the net result could be a disruption to a service that's being provided to the United States, or if it could be detrimental to American business or American jobs, we can get waivers. We can also get waivers for humanitarian reasons as well. Like, sad news and personal family things, deaths in the family and that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's been a real pain. Interestingly, the administration did make a carve out for professional athletes. They don't have to adhere to the 14-day rules. So there is that kind of push as well.
And the waivers, do they also apply to this, let's call it stage 2 phase of restrictions as well? Since Trump has pushed back the visas.
So actually, before we got to the visa restrictions last month, there was another effort made by the administration to curtail immigration. And this one you may remember because he sends a tweet out on a Monday night and he says, "I'm ending all immigration to the United States." Like, for immigration practitioners and foreign nationals, it was like the tweet heard around the world. And this thing came at like 10 o'clock at night. And like, honestly, I think I was up until 4 a.m, like answering emails from people who were like panicked, absolutely panicked. And then he's like, "Okay, well, I'm going to tell you what it is." So then we had to deal with like 3 days of not knowing. And then this thing comes out, and it turned out to be a lot more innocuous than it was like tweeted to be. But it was still pretty heinous because what they did is they blocked family members from getting green cards through embassy processes. And you've heard a lot about this thing called chain migration, where you come to the United States and then you sponsor your parents or your brothers and sisters. That's what that did. It stopped chain migration. What it also stopped was, like, let's say you're a foreign national and you're outside the United States and you're opting to get your green card through employment, but having it processed through the embassy, that was blocked as well. And then finally, it also blocked people who were going to get a green card through something called the diversity lottery, which is sort of like an annual allotment to give people from around the world like a ticket to become a permanent resident in the United States. Interestingly, those moves, and we're talking about like the political aspect of things versus like the actual aspect, those moves fulfilled campaign promises of the Trump administration. I'm going to end chain migration. I'm going to kill the diversity lottery program. Like, those hit those two things. So again, the question becomes like, is this a political thing, or is this something that's really benefiting the United States? Like, how much is you sponsoring your mother for a green card going to impact people who have lost their job because of the pandemic? If you're in the United States and you're bringing this person in, is it really going to make a difference on the economy? If anything, you could argue that having another person here spending their retirement money is a benefit to the economy. So, I think some of those measures were ill-placed. But that was just sort of a warning shot for what came next.
Oh, you think? Yeah. Okay. I see your point of view. Yeah.
And yeah. So what happened then is we had the big executive order that we had come out the week before last, and essentially that one says anybody who has an H-1B visa, L visa, J visa, which is really problematic because we use that for the VIEs, the French language teachers, and H-2B for temporary seasonal work. You can't get a visa. You can't come to the U.S. And that one is really affecting people because the L visa is used for intercompany transferees. And what's interesting is like there's two types of L visa, and on our next session we're going to like really dig into this. But there's the L1A for multinational managers and executives, and there's L1B for specialized knowledge. The L1A has always been viewed as a job creator. If you're an executive and you're responsible for what's going on in France, and you're also responsible for what's going on in the United States, if you're not able to go back and forth between the countries, people in the United States might lose their job. The U.S. entity might lose market share. There's an effect there that I don't think is an intended consequence of the executive order.
Yes, and that's causing many troubles for French or European companies that have subsidiaries in the United States. Many of them just told me, look, it's hard to get a visa, or we had a VIE or French companies, they came back to France and now they need to apply to a second visa to go back, but then they're just stuck in France.
Yeah, and you can get waivers if you are involved in the medical profession, or if your job is going to aid the United States in economic recovery. But here's the thing, they haven't even opened up the embassies for visa processing yet. It was supposed to be June 8th. Now we're in July 8th, and now they're talking about maybe August. But like if you're a student and you're going to process an F1 visa and your school starts at the end of August, you can't even get in for an embassy appointment. And like foreign students are responsible for billions and billions of dollars of economic activity in the United States. Like, I don't really understand the logic there, because if we're talking about economic recovery, why wouldn't you want people to come into the United States that have the ability to spend money but not earn money? So it's tough. This administration is tough. I'll be honest with you, I'm a registered independent. I don't have a particular political alliance per se, but I find what this administration is doing and the way it's treating immigration to be some of the most heinous behavior I've seen, because it's being driven by a perception of what this does to the United States economy as opposed to the reality of how it functions. And like, I can understand if for your standard working visas, you want to put some restrictions in place, make sure there's not US workers available for a particular job, or make it harder to get a green card because for whatever reason. But to say a French company can't set up its operations in the United States because it's going to hurt the economy, I just don't see it. And like, I hope you don't mind me speaking freely about this, but I don't see it.
Yeah. If they want to set up operations and hire American employees, doesn't make sense.
Right. So this is where that waiver is going to become really interesting. And this is where I'm sort of looking to see what the next phase is, because we have a whole bunch of people that we've made these requests for now. This is brand new. This is only 2 weeks old, but we have all these requests in at the embassy saying this person needs to come in because they're going to create jobs. And I'm curious to see if they're going to approve the waivers for that. If we start seeing them approving the waivers under the concept of job creation, then I think, we can navigate this a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing to really bear in mind, and I think this is of critical importance, that e-visa that we talked about at the very beginning,
yes,
the one that, has been truncated, that one was not part of the executive order. So assuming the embassies return to operations in August, we can start processing cases for French-owned businesses. And we can get them the e-visa for the treaty, the one that you can enter for up to 25 months as opposed to using the L visa.
Two questions I have right now is the waivers. Probably some of the audience doesn't know. The waivers must go through the embassies in Europe, right?
If you don't have a visa in hand, then yes.
Okay.
But if you have a visa, and let's say you're like dealing with that 14-day hold, we can actually make the waiver request directly to Customs and Border Protection, the people at the airport here in the United States.
Okay. And regarding the E2 visa, when it was shortened, I heard some complaints that you're doing the E2 visa, and right after you get it, you start right after to get the second one, because by the time you get it, you need to start the process again to get another one because it takes time. Was that true?
True to a certain extent. I mean, I usually don't start preparing extensions until we're sort of like 8 months out from expiration, but 17 months goes by fast. And the problem I have is that the e-visa is really set up for job creation. And I personally feel like most startup enterprises in the United States, whether it's a new business or expansion of an existing business, need 3 years to see if it's going to work. When I look at investments and I look up startups, I'm like, if you don't know after 3 years whether or not this is going to work or not, then you should probably change direction. The problem with the E2 visa as it's currently constructed is you only get 25. And sometimes stuff happens, I don't know, like a global pandemic that like makes it so it's harder to get the business off the ground and running. If you only have 25 months, that's not necessarily enough time to establish the enterprise that would make you eligible for an extension. So that's where we kind of see the problems.
And before this pandemic, just to get a better context about this administration, before the pandemic, did you notice an increase in denials of the visa, in visa rejections?
Oh yeah, I mean across the board. Across the board, adjudications got very strict. I mean, there's a bunch of statistics out there, but like the last year under the Obama administration, about 17% of all cases were issued requests for evidence. Denial rate was somewhere around 8%. Under the Trump administration, that request for evidence has gone up to 70%, 70. And for H-1B visas, we're seeing denials near 30%. So it's been a huge change in adjudication. You know, I'm happy to say, like, my firm, frankly, like, we've been pretty good. We still have like denial rates of like less than 5%. But if you look at it like historically speaking, that's a huge uptick from what we're used to seeing. So I was once speaking to somebody from the Department of Commerce. You know, we'll keep names anonymous for this point, but it was in France. I was there for a meeting, and you know, the Department of Commerce still wants businesses to operate in the United States. They still want people to come. I mean, we still have Select USA. You know, it's almost like two different voices coming from the administration. And we were talking about what the Trump administration had been doing with respect to legal immigration. And he said it's like a death by 1,000 cuts. You know, they keep like poking and poking and poking and pulling away at the system. And ultimately, there's not going to be a system left. And unfortunately, with the pandemic, like that's only been accelerated. You know, it's like just 2 days ago, they announced that if you're a foreign student and your classes have gone online, then you don't have to be in the United States and must leave immediately. Like, what's the point? And again, these are people that are here adding to the economy. Wouldn't you want them like going out and buying sandwiches in the US rather than back in France? I mean, from a US business perspective, it's illogical. But again, they're just pushing this anti-immigration discussion. And I honestly believe at this point, it is more of a political question than an economic question. And that's the disappointing part about it. You know, traditionally, Republican administrations have been very pro-immigrant. And, you know, no, they have. Like the Bush administration, George W. Bush, we had bilateral free trade agreements with Singapore, Chile. We had one with Australia. They all carry visa permissions. In 2007, Bush tried to push through comprehensive immigration reform. I'm not saying I agreed with every aspect of it, but they were moving the immigration discussion. You know, and this is the irony of it. The Democrats historically have been anti-immigrant, you know, and like pro-union and protecting U.S. jobs. It's like the narrative has completely switched. But this administration, in particular, Stephen Miller, who's in charge of immigration policy, I mean, what they've been pushing through has been, well, I think at this point, you know, my personal feelings. But it has been a challenge. It has been a challenge.
And in your opinion, what should we expect for let's say, the after COVID period, or let's say during the fall? Do you imagine the things going worse, or will they just keep what has been decided in the past few weeks?
So this executive order on the ban on green cards being issued abroad and the work visas for Ls, J1s, and H1Bs and H2Bs, that's in effect until December 31st. I don't see that going anywhere. Will things get tighter? We might see some regulatory changes that they'll try to propose, but regulations take a lot longer to create. I don't see anything happening to the E visa. I do think that we will have embassies and consulates reopen, especially because Europe has done a pretty decent job of curtailing the coronavirus. I mean, we'll see what the fall brings, but they've done a much better job managing the pandemic than some areas of the United States. But I mean, honestly, it's going to come down to November. November 3rd is a huge day. It's a huge day. And I can't underscore it enough, because that's going to dictate what happens. You can imagine if this administration gets another 4 years, the restrictions on immigration are going to just continue to increase. And, we'll have to be prepared for that. Now, look, people are fighting back too, right? So that student rule that I just told you about, like Harvard this morning announced that they're suing the government. There's litigation coming forward. So, it's people. That's the beautiful thing about the United States, right? It's like, you have a right to have your voice heard. You have a right to assemble. You have a right to protest. And if you don't think a rule is legal or founded in concepts of the actual regulations and statutes that created them, you can sue the administration. They don't have the final say. And that's a beautiful part about what this system is set up to do. Sometimes it gets uncomfortable. Sometimes things look like they are really out of control. But if you look at the history of the United States, that's really part of who we are, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
People are allowed to speak their mind, and that's what fosters change. And I think that that's something that actually really stands with the French culture as well. You guys are really good at boycotts and protests.
Absolutely, I can agree with that.
You guys know how to strike. I mean, this concept of liberty and the freedom of expression is something we share, and I think that that's a beautiful thing. I think at its core, that's why I think France and the United States have always had a very special bond.
And does Trump has announced I'm saying that for European listeners, does Trump has announced is what he will do in his potential second term in terms of visas and immigration policies, or not yet?
That's the weird thing about his campaign. He hasn't actually really announced what he plans to do.
Okay. Interesting.
It's very strange. Like, he doesn't really have an agenda other than like more of the same.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, it's hard to look forward to the next 4 years when you're dealing with the economic and humanitarian crisis that have resulted from the pandemic. I just don't necessarily believe like forcing the states to reopen when they have increased virus counts is necessarily the way to do it. But again, people have different opinions on how this should be handled. Different states handle things a different way. Again, this is very part of the American system. In a lot of ways, it's not too dissimilar to the way the European Union functions. Like, each country can handle how it wants to a various situation. What I think was interesting coming out of Europe and talking to my colleagues in Europe is that the EU made recommendations, but not a directive, but all of the countries followed those recommendations, with the exception of like Sweden and a couple other places. Here, you have states that like are on complete lockdown, like New York, and seem to have cleared out the virus and things are getting better. Pennsylvania is doing a pretty decent job. I mean, we've had some flare-ups in Allegheny County, but Philadelphia has remained very steady. New Jersey is actually one of the states that has a decreasing virus count right now. And then you have places like Arizona, Florida, and Texas where, Texas has doubled their amount of confirmed cases in the past 17 days, going from 100,000 to 200,000. So that's why I'm kind of hoping when the EU looks at like allowing Americans to travel, maybe they'll look at it by region and not just as the country as a whole. Because it'd be nice for my friends in this area to be able to reap the benefit of the sacrifices we all made in social distancing and keeping it appropriate. But I'll tell you, man, it is a challenging time. It is one of these things where each case is unique. I mean, there are some blanket rules, but the way waivers are being adjudicated, the various visa options that still exist that we can use, the reasons why people are coming to the United States, they're all individual at this point. And, whether you're working with my firm or whether you're considering Pennsylvania or another state, I think what's really important to understand is that you do have resources available. Like what you do on behalf of the Commonwealth is awesome. The fact that you're out there and you're talking to businesses and you're able to give them advice in the same time zone and in real time with real resources, real answers, and being able to communicate and understand the culture, I think that's something that's really special that Pennsylvania does. And in the same respect, we have an amazing team of people here who can help you meet various professionals to get your business off the ground, to help you find real estate, to help you find, frankly, people to work at your company too. And I think the coordinated effort that the Commonwealth has is really second to none. And, whether it's like this podcast or having a meeting with like David Briel or, Lauren Schwartz from the city, I don't think you would have this kind of dedicated access in other parts of the United States. So honestly, it's an honor to be invited to talk to you about immigration. As you can tell, we could probably talk for hours and hours, but I know we got to keep this to about 30 minutes. But I really do look forward to better days ahead. I believe the country is going to emerge stronger because of this, both on a social justice and economic platform. And when we do our future sessions, hopefully we won't have to talk so much about policy, and we can actually talk about strategies for opening your enterprise in the United States and transferring personnel.
Absolutely. I just want to ask you a final question, or maybe a question to conclude. What would you say to European companies in terms of advice to navigate the future? Because I hear a lot of them are pushing back their investment projects, or they are not very confident in the future. Regarding immigration policies, what do you think? Is the waivers in place enough? Each case, you told that each case is very particular, individual cases, you have to work case by case, but you feel confident that we can maintain an activity?
I think the important thing to remember, I think the important thing to remember is that if you are going to be creating jobs in the United States and you're going to be able to get a market share and you're going to be able to benefit the United States, we will be able to get you in the country. What I think is really fascinating is that this is a great time to plan. This is a great time to be pragmatic. This is the time to think about contingencies. And yes, things are going to be delayed, but that doesn't mean that they can't go forward. And hopefully a little bit of extra foresight and forethought will lead to greater success for when things do open up and are operational. One of the things I've always seen is there's always like a rush to attack the US market by French companies. Like, we have to get over there. This is where our product, especially if you're looking for like venture capital money, or you have like a direct to consumer or a consumer electronic product, there's this like push, we got to get over there, we got to get over there. And, sometimes like having or being forced to take a pause can pay dividends. But, I'm confident in our ability as particularly the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I'm confident in our ability to emerge stronger. And I just, say like, look, don't give up on your hopes and dreams of coming to America. They just might be delayed.
Yeah. And that's fine. You have time to think about your investment and your strategy. Might be a good thing. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for this episode and for sharing your thoughts and explaining the context of what's going on in the US right now in terms of immigration policies. And I'm looking forward to do another episode with you explaining the visas and, as you said, hopefully in a better situation, speaking about investments only and not about what's going on right now. The crazy situation. Yeah.
Mon plaisir and bonne chance.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan, and see you soon.